I'll never forget the first time I watched The Shining. I had no idea what was going on in that movie. The plot was illogical. There was no hero. Shelley Duvall is the opposite of what you'd expect. And Jack Nicholson gives one of the weirdest performances I've ever seen. He does what's called mugging, and in a lot of acting schools, it'll get you an F, and for good reason. But nonetheless, when that movie was over, I was so freaked out that I had to sleep with the lights on. And I'm not the only person who had this reaction. And, like a lot of people, I wondered how it worked. There are a lot of theories about metaphors and conspiracies, but when I was working on the last video, I noticed something else about it, which I think is the real reason that this movie, which ignores so many rules of filmmaking, affected me so much. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, our minds never tell us why we feel the way we do, and that's part of what makes movies so confusing. And likewise, a lot of people thought The Shining was bad at first, and people have tried to make better versions, which never actually matched it. I think this is because Stanley Kubrick made some very unique decisions with this movie, and he always had reasons for what he did in his films, even though he rarely explained himself. And 40 years after this movie was made, here's what I finally realized about it. Horror movies are based on threat. You see someone in danger on screen, and that triggers your adrenaline to run away or help them, and that excitement feels good. But, like we talk about, the point of it is the rush of adrenaline, and you can deliver the threat that creates that in different ways. It can be through the people on screen, and at first glance that's what The Shining looks like. But the fear in The Shining isn't actually based on Jack Torrance threatening his wife or his son. They're not the real victims here. You are, the viewer. This movie shows you traumatizing things without warning, at any time, and you never know what you'll have to see next. Now, that's a subtle difference, but it's a powerful one, and if you look close, you can see it. Normally, your damsel in distress is a beautiful and sympathetic person, so you want her to survive. Shelley Duvall was the opposite of that, and she actually looks pretty scary herself. And likewise, Danny, the son, isn't cute. He has very little personality, so it's not intended for you to like or identify with either one of them. But they actually have a unique role in the film, because they add to the stress. Because neither of them were movie stars at the time, that meant anything could happen to them. And Stanley Kubrick deliberately made Shelley Duvall underline the situation.
When you do it, you've got to look desperate, Shelley. You're just wasting everybody's time there.
She spends the whole movie crying and screaming, which, like we've talked about, is very difficult to watch. And Kubrick drags those scenes on, far past the point where a normal movie would give you a break, which establishes to you just how serious and intense the situation is. But that's not the whole of it, because there's a whole other part that seems to go the other way, and that is Jack Nicholson himself. And this is where I think the movie became something people had never seen before, and scared them in a way they couldn't explain. Like we said, Jack mugs his way through this movie.
Well, Stephen obviously didn't like my picture very much. And I said, well, it's almost like kabuki theater. He said, you mean you think Jack went over the top? And I said, yeah, I kind of did.
Normally, an actor never does this unless they're bad.
John goes, if you don't have my money... I'm sorry, what?
Or they don't respect the material. They don't like or care about what they've been asked to do. But, by all accounts, Stanley Kubrick told Jack Nicholson to do this, for very specific reasons. And here's what I think they were. When you see Jack Nicholson purposefully giving a bad performance in this movie, it says something to you subconsciously. Not about the character Jack Torrance and what he's feeling, but about Jack Nicholson, the actor, and what he was feeling. He's saying this: when I got up this morning, in my trailer, they gave me the script about a guy killing his own wife and son while she screams for mercy with no one to help, and I laughed. This movie, these things which are so awful and hard for you to watch, are a joke to me, and I'm mocking the whole idea while I'm in it. Imagine if I gave you a book about children being killed, and when you opened it up, it was written in crayon, with smiley faces all over it. You'd realize that that author was sick, and you'd be really disturbed. And that is exactly what Jack Nicholson's performance is telling you in this movie. And even more, Jack Nicholson is supposed to be doing the opposite for you. He's supposed to be the star of the movie, the actor you know from other places, who makes you feel good and respected because he's performing his best for you. And he's supposed to assure you, after everything else, that this is just a Hollywood movie and there are places it won't go. And Jack Nicholson's performance takes all that and throws it in the trash. You get no respect, you get no familiarity, and the effect of that, when combined with everything else, is like being on a roller coaster without a lap bar. The things you think will never happen and don't want to see can happen here, at any time, and that is truly terrifying. And actually, much more terrifying than any normal movie, because we get far more frightened when we ourselves are threatened than when we watch it happen to someone else on screen, which made this movie as powerful and unique as it was. Now, of course, the traumatic feeling has some downsides as well. I've never watched it again. But when a movie does things so differently and so much more intensely, it actually picks up some positive things too. Many younger people enjoyed it because the dark tone made them feel more mature. People liked the feeling of seeing a movie that was so different, and even saw making it through as a badge of honor. And those good feelings are real too, which shows just how multidimensional our feelings are, and how many ways we can stimulate them. Stanley Kubrick, to my knowledge, never actually explained the choices he made in The Shining. And if he was doing this, he may not have even consciously realized it. He knew that movies were about emotion, and he used his emotions when making decisions, without any fear of where they may lead him.
You're in an area where, as I say, it's more like music, than rational thought.
And I think this is one of the things that made him such a great director, which we all can learn from, and what made The Shining so unforgettable. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a share, and I'll see you soon.